You know, for the past couple of years, I've been slowly becoming more of a Capcom guy. I started playing all of the Devil May Cry games, thank you lady much. I've also gotten into the groove of dropping some bodies in Street Fighter, and I've been scouring the lands of Monster Hunter with stories. But out of all of Capcom's legendary franchises, the one I'll always roll with the most is Mega Man. Now, usually this would be the part where I recall the moment where I first laid my eyes on the blue guy. But unfortunately in this case, I have no idea when I first discovered Mega Man. Yeah, my memory is way too foggy to remember specific details like that. Oddly enough, I think the earliest memory I can even recall of seeing Mega Man was with Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the PS2, way back in the early to mid 2000s. One of my relatives took me over to one of their friends' places and they had the game booted up on their TV. There were quite a few things I remembered that really attracted me to Mega Man. He looked like a kid, just like I was at the time. His standard color was blue, which was and still is my favorite color. Had a cool robot dog sidekick, and dude had a buster cannon on his arm. Just a few features that were more than enough for a boy my age to want to be a fan. Haha. But seriously, if there's one thing I'll definitely say up front, it's that one of the main reasons I fell in love with Mega Man immediately and stayed in love for all of these years is his character design. As a kid who grew up loving shows like My Life as a Teenage Robot on Nickelodeon, and especially Robot Boy on Cartoon Network, I was always a huge lover of robots, especially robots with human emotions, cool powers, and sleek designs. There was something so cool about a machine that could still feel, still fight for justice, and look awesome doing it. And Mega Man was like the ultimate version of that. He always had that cool and bright, ready to go vibe to him with a sense of innocence for who he is, which made it so much easier for a kid like me to relate to when I was at that age. All of which made Mega Man not only instantly stand out from every other character under Capcom's umbrella, but made him an icon to me. A little guy built to fight evil, but with a heart that always tried to do the right thing. That hit hard for a cartoon-loving kid like me. Prepare yourselves for a curveball on this. Taking everything I just said, guess how many Mega Man games I played back in the day as a kid? 0. And we're not talking about Mr. What Am I Fighting For here. Throughout all the 2000s, I've never played any of the Mega Man games whatsoever, which then sparks the question for many of you. How can I hold so much nostalgia as a fan of this series if I've never grown up with any of the official releases? This one's a throwback from my generation. Flash games. Us 2000s kids already know the deal. You had some downtime during computer classes in middle school? Armor Games. Had an open computer lab somewhere in your community? Newgrounds. Or in my case, you didn't really have a lot of access to game consoles, but you had a pretty decent family computer on standby? Y8 Games. As well as so many other generation-defining websites that hosted so many Flash browser games that we all loved. As a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, this era was a huge part of my love for that franchise during that time, but to bring this back to Mega Man specifically, there were so many awesome Flash games made by so many talented fan creators that I used to enjoy non-stop, many of which were RPGs funny enough. And even though I knew nothing of the lore of Mega Man or Mega Man X, just seeing the different flashy attacks of each character as well as their transformation into different armor suits were so cool to me back in the day. As well as how a lot of these Flash game developers would use slick animations to show off the personalities of each character, something that could not be emphasized more than with X vs. Zero Decisive Battle by the creator Ultimate Maverick X. This one's just a Sprite Flash animated short, but ever since it came out over a decade ago, I must have seen this like 50 times. Everything about this fight, especially with this choreography, was incredible and made me super engaged with these characters. Again, all without ever having touched a single official Mega Man game. And I've already mentioned I was a huge Sonic fan, and seeing X and Zero appear in the Flash series Final Fantasy Sonic X to fight along Sonic and Shadow was a dream for me as a kid back in the day. And I can make an entire video discussing my journey growing up with Flash games alone as a kid. In fact, I might just do that. But the point is, Flash games and animations in general was the bridge that brought me into the Mega Man franchise. Now, in regards to when I actually did start playing the official Mega Man games and my experience with them that led me into becoming the diehard fan I am today, there's a lot to unpack there, especially since there's so many incarnations of Mega Man to go around. So let's start one by one. Now, the classic series is one I would say I have the least attachment to. Not because any of it is bad by any means, since I totally like and enjoy classic Mega Man, but it's more so that I enjoy every other Mega Man series more than this. But either way, I enjoyed Mega Mans 1 through 5 during my middle school years back in the early 2010s through emulation. Around 2013 to 2014-ish, I would say. And I definitely enjoyed them, with Mega Man 2 obviously being my favorite out of the bunch. The thing about classic Mega Man, however, is that even though I was an early teenager at the time, I still think I would have enjoyed this series a lot more if I played them when I was a bit younger. Because after a while, the classic Mega Man games kind of felt the same as the entries went on, more so in the Mega Man 4 and 5 territory. And back in the 90s when these games were first coming out, I hear that they used to do yearly releases, which more than likely contributed to a few of these games feeling samey. Granted, they all do have great replay value because of how these games were designed by being able to choose whichever robot master you want to tackle first. But for the first few entries, this really is just your standard run and gun challenging platformer with the objective always being the same: take out all the robot masters and stop Dr. Wily. Which is still pretty cool on paper, since if there's one thing that these games are so good at doing, it's offering a sweet arcade-like experience, with great music too. Truth be told, I still have yet to play Mega Man 6 through 10 at this point, despite seeing footage of all of them plenty of times now. But the general point is that all of these games are a really fun time. And just recently I picked some of them up again on the Mega Man Legacy Collection on my PS4, and I found myself appreciating them on a whole new level than I did beforehand. The concept of absorbing the abilities of a boss after you beat it and using their abilities in other levels and as weapon weaknesses against other robot masters is genius, and adds so much to what makes Mega Man a unique and cool character. And to me, these games also serve as a really cool retro time capsule of how gaming used to be prior to me being born. But I would say the breaking point of what really made me love classic Mega Man as much as I do now was with 2018's Mega Man 11. There's so much I want to say about that entry specifically, but to keep it brief, it was a fantastic game from start to finish, and in my opinion, one of the best returns ever for, at the time, a long since absent franchise. But overall, classic Mega Man is rightfully iconic. But if classic Mega Man was my fun little arcade ride, Mega Man X was the full-blown action movie. This was where the franchise leveled up in every way, and I was hooked from the moment I laid my eyes on it. First off, X was always my favorite Mega Man growing up. Nowadays it's always between him and Geostellar, but we'll talk more about that once we get to Star Force. But X I always thought had a rocking design. He had so much of that action-packed edge that I always loved from my generation and prior, and I still remember all the times I hilariously tried to draw him back in school. But you'll start to notice a trend here when I say I started playing Mega Man X 1 through 6 around the same time in middle school through emulation. And yeah, this is where most of my love for this franchise sprouted. Not only did Mega Man X immediately lead with a cool, long-running anime-inspired story canon to worry about, these games are high adrenaline. The classic Mega Man games were far from easy experiences, especially with the very first Mega Man game. But Mega Man X was the series that got me to step it up and seriously learn boss patterns. I've died more times than I can count on my first few attempts at these Maverick bosses, but once I did get the hang of it and eventually beat them, it felt so earned and satisfying. X's buster shots are also so much cooler to witness on screen, and the concept of being able to equip X with armor upgrades to make him even more powerful kicks so much ass. And that's not to mention how sick it feels to have the ability to dash and wall kick, which makes traveling through these stages 50 times more fun than they usually would through regular ground speed, which goes back to what I said about these games being high adrenaline. And Zero, oh my god, Zero. I love X as a character, but Zero is one of my favorite characters in gaming. He is the reason I typically go back to X4 or X5 whenever I feel like picking up these games again, because his Z-Saver offensive playstyle is so much fun. Not only is his design so rad, but dashing through these stages while doing some of his slashes on enemies makes me feel badass as hell. Can't forget about how much I love the freaking music in nearly all of these games. It's hard to pick a definitive favorite out of the entirety of the Mega Man X lineup, but from all the ones I played, X1, X4, and X5 tended to be the ones that were the funnest to play for me. I bought X4 and X5 on PSN once I got my PS3 in 2014 and replayed those games on there. But at the time, I had no legal means of getting my hands on X6 through X8. And for the longest time, I was hoping Capcom would release another Mega Man X collection so I would have all of the games under one umbrella. Which is why I was really happy when they did eventually release the Mega Man X Legacy collection back in 2018. And I even loved how they went above and beyond by including things like the Day of Sigma, which was his anime OVA that served as a prologue for the Mega Man X storyline, something that I really enjoyed watching back then and even now. I still haven't played X7 or X8 yet, but I've seen numerous clips of the two online, so I'm generally aware of both the positives and negatives of both games. There's so much more to say about these games, but the general point is that I love the Mega Man X series. There's a reason why X alone sold Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite for me. There's a reason why Zero was my main in all the fighting games that he appeared in. Classic Mega Man is really fun, but when it comes to the 2D side-scrolling action, the Mega Man X formula is where it's at for me. Fingers crossed that we do get a Mega Man X9 one day, but for what we have right now, the X series will always steal the show. Now check this, imagine playing Tatsunoko vs. Capcom on the Wii back in the early 2010s and going through the character selection screen and being like, wait, why isn't Mega Man wearing a helmet? Walnut who? So yeah, let's talk about Mega Man Legends. Seriously, truth be told, this was how I discovered the existence of Mega Man Legends since I've never heard of it beforehand. Even crazier is that the very first notable circulation of news and discussions I've seen about the game on the internet was the cancellation of Mega Man Legends 3 so many years ago, which obviously sucked for Mega Man fans, including myself, but on the other hand, made me interested in wanting to learn more about the series. I played a little bit of it on emulator, but luckily was able to purchase all the games on PS3 and played the rest on there. Legends definitely stands out as the most unique of all the Mega Man iterations because it's a fully 3D third-person action RPG. So instead of Robot Masters, Reploids, Mavericks, and all the other high-tech sci-fi stuff you would typically deal with in the classic and X series, we're now in a distant future where everything is mostly covered in ocean, and what's left of civilization are scattered lands. You play as Mega Man Walnut, who's a digger, which are essentially futuristic treasure hunters, and you, your best friend Roll Casket, and your grandfather go around the land exploring caves, dungeons, to find all these different secrets while occasionally butting heads with the Bond family. I mentioned that these games are the most unique out of the Mega Man franchise, but what caught me by surprise is that these games are also the most charming out of the entire franchise. Seriously, the characters in Mega Man Legends are some of the most lovable characters in the entire franchise. Every single one of them are so lovable, especially Tron Bonne. She's one of those characters where half the time I wish I didn't have to fight her because her entire personality is so much fun, and all the interactions she has with Mega Man Walnut throughout the games are some of the most adorable stuff I've ever seen, which is part of what makes their dynamic work so well. She's 100% my favorite character in the entire Mega Man Legends trilogy and one of my favorite female video game characters, period, which made me extra motivated than I already was to have played the misadventures of Tron Bonne, which acted as a sort of spin-off prequel storyline to Mega Man Legends 1, which starred Tron herself. The game itself was like a short mix of puzzles and action stages, which I thought was pretty enjoyable in its own right, but what I really liked about the game is that it gave more story to Tron and the entire Bond family, and seeing Tron command the serve bots the way that she does is always cool, and quite amusing to see sometimes. By the way, I love these guys, one of the most lovable little guys out there. But getting back to both of the core Legends games, the charm doesn't stop there. Visual wise, these games hold up incredibly well because Mega Man Legends goes for a more anime inspired approach to art style and lighting, and you can see that from how vibrant the colors are from how much they pop on screen. Even the animation on these character models still do a great job at making these cutscenes feel like you're watching a legit anime. My love for this series clearly knows no bounds, but seriously, Mega Man Legends 1 and 2 are fantastic games and are so much fun to play, and the misadventures of Tron Bonne is pretty cool too. Going by Capcom's track record, it is kinda safe to say that we'll get a legacy collection of these at some point, but I really hope it's sooner rather than later because I feel not enough gamers of this generation have experienced these titles because they came out such a long time ago. I'd like to say get these off of the PlayStation 3 stores as soon as you possibly can before those stores inevitably close, but then it becomes a matter of, do you guys still have your PS3s on you? And obviously with how Legends 2 ended, even after all these years later, I'm still crossing my fingers that we one day do get the sequel that we were initially promised. Because the footage that we do have of Mega Man Legends 3 before it was cancelled looked like it really could have been something, and I don't want to see an idea like this be buried into the dirt and never to be seen again. This series deserves another chance in the spotlight. After all, it's as they say, legends never die. Now, I've already talked about how Zero from Mega Man X is one of the coolest characters in video games to me, and there's a scene in Mega Man X6 where Zero puts himself in a cryogenic sleep that lasted around 100 years. This leads us into the Mega Man Zero series. Just as the others, I played all 4 of these games numerous times in middle school through emulation, and I've always known that this version of Zero existed because, as I've said early on, I played tons of Flash games that included him in it, so it never really took me long to get used to this design of Zero, and in fact, I actually dig it. So So essentially, what this 4-game saga entails is that after Zero sealed himself in that cryogenic sleep I mentioned, he wakes up in a post-apocalyptic era completely different from the Mega Man X timeline with no memories of himself. The world is now ruled by a seemingly utopian city called Neo Arcadia, which claims to protect humanity, but behind the scenes, it's persecuting Reploids under the guise of keeping peace. So you join this resistance led by this researcher and scientist CL, and you help fight against Neo Arcadia while also helping Zero rediscover who he really is. Now this is definitely a great series too. I actually enjoyed this much more than the X series because it feels like the Mega Man Zero series has a much more cohesive and emotionally driven narrative overall. As you play through all 4 games, it feels like everything you do here matters and contributes to the much bigger picture of the narrative. And Zero himself is just as cool here as he was in the X games, just with a quieter badass take of his character compared to how he was in X. And I love the relationship he had with CL in these games because you can tell she's growing a sweet fondness for Zero after seeing all the lengths he went to protect her and advance her cause for humanity despite Zero having no obligation to stay. And in return, Zero shares that connection with her because she serves as the catalyst to reawakening the dormant emotions that he used to have. But even gameplay wise, these games totally rock. It's got all the same run and gun traits of what you would enjoy from the Mega Man X games, but since you're Zero, you also have a Z-Saber for the same hack and slash action you loved prior. And I think that's what I love about the Zero series the most because it's essentially a combination of X's defensive cannon shot play and Zero's offensive sword play. And it feels so fun to play as you go through these stages, especially when you get additional weapons to Zero's arsenal. Similar to the Mega Man X games, over the course of time, I've been wanting a much more modern bundle that had all of the Mega Man Zero games in one package. So when Capcom announced that they were releasing the Mega Man Zero/ZX Legacy Collection in 2020, you know I scooped that up immediately. And once I did, I replayed all 4 of the games, having the exact same amount of fun as I did several years prior. The Mega Man Zero series is truly a kick-ass action platformer that I cannot recommend enough, and that this time serves as a really fitting and satisfying conclusion to the absolute legend that is Zero in this franchise. But since I did bring up the Legacy Collection, why don't we chat about the Mega Man ZX series for a bit? When it comes to this duology, for the longest time, I didn't really have any real means of playing them, because even when I tried playing a tiny bit of it on emulator, it felt like I was at the point with this series where it's much more efficient to play these games on original hardware, mostly because of the double screen the game utilized on the Nintendo DS. And when the Mega Man Zero/ZX Legacy Collection came out, outside of wanting to re-experience the Zero series, I now had an extra incentive to pick up this collection to finally experience the ZX series. So basically these games take place around 100 years after the Zero series concluded. Reploids and humans are coexisting again, but rogue Reploids known as Mavericks are still on the loose, threatening the balance of the world. And instead of playing as a traditional Mega Man or Zero, you get to choose between 2 human-like characters in both games as the person you follow. It's pretty much like Pokemon where you pick between a boy and a girl. You have Vent and Ale in ZX1 and Gray and Ash in ZX Advent. I usually went with the females because why not? Hey, something about dodging missiles while looking fabulous just kinda hits different. Now when it comes to the actual games themselves, I can't say I'm as attached to them as I am with the Zero series and prior, but these are still fun games. The biggest proponent for that being the biometals, which are these powerful relics you can merge with to gain access to the powers of past heroes like X and Zero. So you do essentially have that same slick playstyle that you had back in the Zero series, except now with the biometals, you can switch to different armors on the spot that house unique individual playstyles to switch up the gameplay. Something I found super fun and made for really creative level design and set pieces. There's also a lot more exploration in these titles than ever before. The first game even being a Metroidvania, which let's just say is a hit or miss. The stories of both games unfortunately didn't grab me as much as I wanted them to, but by the way ZX Advent ends, you get the sense that the developers were planning on doing a third game. But I'm guessing because of low sales, that just didn't end up happening. And it's definitely unfortunate because I really would have liked to see what the developers Inti Creates had in mind of pushing this series further in regards to gameplay. Because as standard Mega Man games, the ZX series never felt better to play and gives you so many options on how you want to tackle them, while also being a celebration of the entire franchise at the same time. So while ZX might not be my favorite branch of the franchise, it's still a damn good time. But nothing gets the blood pumping more than the words "Jack in Mega Man Power Up," doesn't it? Alright, now let me tell you guys a short story. Back when I was really young in the mid-2000s, I used to regularly go over to my, at the time, best friend's apartment below me. And I remember this one time I went, there was some sort of special occasion. I don't remember if it was his birthday or something, but I do know that he and his family were giving out free DVDs to all of the kids in the apartment building for that particular day. So when he gave me one of those DVDs, the cover had a cartoon on the front, but I had no idea what it was. So when I headed back to my place and placed the DVD inside the player, that's when I found out that this was the the first episode of a show called Mega Man NT Warrior, before I even knew what an anime was yet. And yeah, this was how I discovered the existence of Mega Man Battle Network, because before that, I never saw this design of Mega Man before. And it took me a few years later to figure out that this was an anime adaptation of a long-running spin-off series on the Game Boy Advance. But from how much I enjoyed the first episode of NT Warrior, I was definitely hooked. The first time I got a chance to play any of these games was during middle school in the early 2010s through, as you guessed it, my journey to become King of the Pirates. Unlike the fantasy-esque settings of previous iterations, Mega Man Battle Network takes place in a modern-day futuristic setting where nearly everything is connected to the internet, from traffic lights to kitchen appliances. Thinking about it now, 20 years after these games came out, I guess that's not too different from how our current real world is today. But anyway, the way people operate in this digital world is through handheld devices called PETs, aka personal terminals, which house AI companions known as NetNavis. You play as Lan Hikari, a regular elementary school kid, and his NetNavi Megaman.exe. And basically it's about both of them navigating real-life challenges while also jacking into the net to solve cybercrime by battling net viruses and enemy NetNavis. Mega Man Battle Network is pretty much the Pokemon of this franchise. Instead of regular 2D action platforming, this series is all about grid-based card collecting action combat. To be transparent, when I started playing these games back in middle school, I mostly played the first two and didn't really get that far in either one. And it was for two reasons: the random encounters being too repetitive and the level design of the maps royally ticking me off for how confusing it was for me at the time. I still rocked with the concept of these games, so I always planned on giving this series another shot, but never got around to it. So as the trend goes, when Capcom announced the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection in 2022, I was there day one. Which, by the way, there's so much I can say about this Legacy Collection alone. It's easily my favorite out of all the other Legacy Collections we've gotten so far, with how much passion and effort was put into it. But with all of that backstory said and done, when it comes to how I feel about the series itself, now having played all the games, Mega Man Battle Network is arguably my favorite Mega Man series. It's almost indescribable how much of a blast I had playing all of these games back in 2023. Being able to jack in and run around all over the internet, collect and use all of these battle chips, and going head to head against familiar faces in net battles was so fun. And there's so much strategy to it with both your movements on the grid and what battle chips you decide to keep in your inventory. And with this game's strategic and competitive battle system also comes a lot of heavy difficulties from a lot of the bosses in these games. Some of these bosses in these games are no joke, and it took me several tries to finally get them in the end. But it's one of those things where, because it's all skill based with how you recognize patterns to dodge and attack and how you utilize your battle chips, each victory feels incredibly earned, giving Battle Network the same satisfying replayability traits that the entire franchise has since its inception, but in its own unique way. And that's not to mention the very well written story across all the games. Over the course of time, you really start to get attached to Lan and his friends Meilu, Dex, Yai, Chad, and all their NetNavis. They're just such a fun crew, the kind of friends any kid wished they had back in the day. And seeing all the build-ups, the reveals, the stakes, and the climactic finale each game has with its narrative is all so exciting to watch. I remembered being on the edge of my seat playing Battle Networks 2 and 5, especially 5 with how everything went down in the end. Team Colonel is actually my favorite out of all of them. There's so much more I want to say about these games, but overall, they're just really damn fun experiences that made me glad I finally got a chance to play all of them and understand why the Battle Network games were so beloved back in the day and still are even now. Plus, the fact that the Legacy Collection allows you to play net battles against people online is even better. To me, Mega Man Battle Network represents the peak of all the passion that the developers under Capcom had for Mega Man back in the 2000s, with how effortlessly they made Mega Man transition into other genres that no one would have thought was possible. And I think my favorite part about this was all the promotional lead up to the release of this Legacy Collection, where you had Capcom post all of the episodes of the Mega Man NT Warrior anime on their YouTube channel for free for a year, and they brought back the original guy who did the manga adaptation for this series decades ago for one more epilogue chapter. The entire aura surrounding this was so positive and genuinely made me happy to be a fan of this franchise. But to put the cap on the Battle Network series, these games are truly one of a kind, and there's really no other series quite like it.
Jack in! Mega Man! Power up!
Mega Man and RPGs go hand in hand with each other, don't they? I would think so, since after the success of the Battle Network series on Game Boy Advance, they immediately wanted to reach for the stars by launching a new Mega Man RPG series for the Nintendo DS. So this is the part where I should be talking about Mega Man Star Force, isn't it? Unfortunately guys, this is the only Mega Man spin-off series that I've never had the chance to play at all. Can't even recall when I first discovered the existence of this series either. Didn't even attempt to emulate these games because from the footage I've seen, this series heavily uses both screens experience on the DS, so I don't even want to imagine how uncomfortable these games might feel if I tried playing it on a single screen. So I sadly can't really say much in regards to experience on the actual games. But what I can say is that I've seen most of the Mega Man Star Force anime, and I think that was what really drove my interest for Star Force to where it is right now. Because that anime was surprisingly really enjoyable, and I even loved the short-lived English dub that they did for it back in the day for Toonami Jetstream. So based off of my knowledge of the anime, this universe takes place hundreds of years after Battle Network. Instead of the internet being the main source of power in this world, it's now EM waves, invisible energy that powers communication, devices, and even entire cities. And you play as this kid, Geostellar, who one day encounters an alien life form by the name of Omegasis, and together they EM wave fuse to become the new Mega Man. If there's one thing I have to say immediately that has me interested in this series, it's the main protagonist himself, Geostellar. The reasoning as to why is because of the way the story laid itself out for his arc to manifest. From all the episodes I've seen of the anime, I immediately wanted to know so much more about his character and see where his journey takes him, because unlike with the previous protagonist, for example, Geo didn't start out brave or confident. He's a loner, often skipping school and avoiding people because he's grieving over the disappearance of his father. He's one of the more relatable and human protagonists in the entire Mega Man franchise, which instantly makes him a much more interesting character than someone like Lan Hikari, for example, despite me also liking him as a protagonist. And it's also the character designs, dude. I totally dig the look of Geo as Mega Man and all the different armor sets he gets, which is something the artists of Mega Man Battle Network and Star Force are so good at with this franchise. But imagine finishing the Battle Network series and taking a look at the gallery mode of the Legacy Collection to see all of the killer art of Geo side by side with Mega Man.exe. All of this made me want to anticipate a Legacy Collection for Star Force more than ever before, especially after taking some time to look at the actual gameplay of the Star Force games, and I'm like, yeah, this is definitely a game I play the hell out of on my Nintendo Switch. I'm serious, outside of a remaster bundle of all of the Breath of Fire games, the number one thing I'd want from Capcom out of anything else under their umbrella is a Mega Man Star Force Legacy Collection. The more days that go by, the more I wish I could have these games in my hand right now, experiencing these characters, the storylines, getting a feel for the gameplay, and overall exploring the universe that is this series. Plus, now that it's been recently discovered that there was going to be a Mega Man Star Force 4 but got cancelled midway through development, I sometimes sat there looking at this concept art thinking how cool it would have been if this game actually happened. It's been well over a decade, but I seriously hope the developers who worked on this unfinished title still have the notes of this project somewhere, because I would love to see this game revived. Either way, let's all hope Capcom has something cooking for Star Force very soon. And that pretty much ends it for Mega Man today. Haha. Clearly, Mega Man's a lengthy subject to talk about, but I think that's what makes Mega Man so cool, is the fact that because he has so many of these great games that span across many different series, each one feels like a different chapter in his legacy, each with its own world, its own tone, and its own impact. No matter who you are or when you started, there's a version of Mega Man out there that speaks to you. And no matter which version of Mega Man that is, the heart behind the character is the same across the board. Lastly, to give a brief look at the current state of the franchise, we haven't had a purely new Mega Man game since Mega Man 11 in 2018. Obviously, that's not a reality that I'm in love with, and I was hoping the high success of the Battle Network Legacy Collection would have helped speedrun the process of us getting more Mega Man content. Yet here we are. I'm guessing the reasoning as to why this is because the, at the time, series producer of Mega Man left Capcom 2 years ago, and maybe the process of trying to find a replacement for him who's as familiar and well equipped for this franchise is a very time-consuming process? I don't know. It's definitely a concerning sight to see. But I'll say this, Mega Man has always found a way to bounce back. From witnessing all the cancelled games from over a decade ago, to everything that happened with Keiji Inafune with Mighty No. 9, Mega Man's been through quite a lot. But with the back-to-back successes of the Legacy Collections, it's clear there's still a strong audience here. Capcom knows it, and even if they're moving slow, I wouldn't be surprised if something new is quietly in development behind the scenes. It might not come soon, but I have faith it'll come when the time is right. But despite it all, from the incredible amount of joy and pleasure this franchise provided me over the years, Mega Man will forever be one of my favorite icons in video gaming. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching and have yourselves a great day. Laters.
I'm going to go ahead and meet our booty face to face.